Jesus is going after, there's no business for him to leave behind. Like, he inherited all this, right? Mm-hmm. But I can see Jesus coming after, like, if you made a lot of money off of business, man, the temptation to be self-sufficient. I mean, I've worked hard for everything I have. And how different is that than what Timothy says when he says, but put your hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. The American, I pulled myself up by my bootstraps, I've worked hard for everything I have, totally overlooks who gave you health, who gave you opportunities, who gave you the sunshine every day to get up, who gave you the intelligence, who gave you the strength, it just overlooks all of that, and it runs right immediately to, look what I've done. And that's such a dangerous place to be in, right? So I think the bigger picture there is, for anyone coming to Jesus, we have to understand what he's inviting us to. It's a death to self and a new way to life.
Shelton, welcome back onto the show.
Hey, glad to be here.
Always fun to have you on and to talk scriptures, to talk life, to talk Jesus and what it means to belong to him and to follow him. And we've been doing a series the last few times you've been on. We've been examining the difficult sayings of Jesus, the hard sayings of Jesus. The sayings that we read them, and the temptation is either to just shrug our shoulders and say, well, I just don't know what that means, or to kind of go the opposite direction and say, well, surely he could not have meant that, you know? And so what we want to do in these conversations is take a deep dive, wrestle with the scriptures. I don't think either one of us would say that we fully understand the teachings, but we have wrestled with it over the years. We do have some ideas and some insights, and hopefully this conversation today will be one that brings some insights to our listeners.
Yeah, even in like what we're going to study today, there's an expectation that if we're going to follow the Son of God, it's going to be uncomfortable at times, right? And so he's going to call out, there's so much in me he needs to call out. And I like these hard sayings, hard teachings, because those are really the friction points, you know, and you could see some of them are hard, like today's, we're going to see even his disciples in that time.
Right.
They're like, whoa, what are you doing? This is very hard. But I appreciate that, because I have the exact same response like to what Peter has in this. Like, wow, hold on. But what does Jesus and his grace do in there if everything he does towards us is love and to save us and redeem us, then even these hard places of friction, he's doing a good work in us. And so that's my prayer for our conversation today, both for me and you, but for anybody that listens, you know, that he would do a good work in us and uproot and do what he needs to do in our hearts and minds.
Yeah, we've looked at, this is the third conversation we've had on the hard sayings of Jesus. We looked at his teaching from John 6, eat my flesh and drink my blood. We also looked at the Son of Man as Lord of the Sabbath the last time around. And today we're going to examine his teaching about wealth, and specifically, it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich person to enter the kingdom of God. And this is found in the three synoptic gospels. We find it in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. We're going to start out just by reading the text from Mark's gospel, and we may pull in some thoughts from Matthew and Luke because there are just slight differences. It's actually very, very uniform across the three gospels, but Mark has a few details that we talked about before hitting record here. So let me just read for us, and then we'll open it up and we'll.
You're going to start all the way back at the rich young ruler.
Yeah, we're going to start. So Jesus gives this hard saying about the camel and the eye of the needle, following his interaction with the rich young ruler.
Yeah.
And so we're going to start with his encounter with that man, and then we'll take it all the way through. His disciples' reaction to Jesus saying that it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle. So we're going to read from Mark chapter 10, verses 17 through 27, and then we'll just spend some time trying to draw out principles. And so let's read it. It says, As he was setting out on a journey, a man ran up, knelt down before him, and asked, "Good teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life?" "Why do you call me good?" Jesus asked him. "No one is good except God alone. You know the commandments: do not murder, do not commit adultery, do not steal, do not bear false witness, do not defraud, honor your father and mother." He said to him, "Teacher, I have kept all these from my youth." Looking at him, Jesus loved him and said to him, "You lack one thing. Go, sell all you have and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Then come, follow me." But he was dismayed by this demand, and he went away grieving, because he had many possessions. Jesus looked around and said to his disciples, "How hard it is for those who have wealth to enter the kingdom of God." The disciples were astonished at his words. Again Jesus said to them, "Children, how hard it is to enter the kingdom of God. It is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich person to enter the kingdom of God." They were even more astonished, saying to one another, "Then who can be saved?" Looking at them, Jesus said, "With man it is impossible, but not with God, because all things are possible with God." So there's a lot there. We're not going to be able to pull out every detail, but what are your first glance impressions as we read through that together this morning?
Yeah, I mean, it makes you squirm because I mean, I earlier this year in January, I was in Zambia, and I was sitting in a house of a pastor there,
Yeah.
and they call it in a compound, which is basically maybe in the United States something similar to like project housing, where you have a lot of houses built together, and so this is a cinder block home that is tiny, and he's done it all himself, trying to build up this thing, and it is, he's so proud of his house, and he served us, and he's a sweetheart, and his wife, and daughter, and it was one of the most humbling experiences of my life. They served us tea and coffee, and they were so excited to serve us sandwiches, and I was just, I was humbled down to my core, and this text was resonating in my head.
Even then, when you were...
As I'm there, because wealth is relative. In the United States, I wouldn't call myself wealthy.
Yes.
Sitting in that home,
Yeah.
eating a meal, they were so proud. My wealth compared to this sweet pastor,
Yeah.
in terms of finances, he was far wealthier in terms of humility and love, and he taught me so much. I just sat and wrestled with Jesus. I think I need to go back and re-wrestle with what you have to say about wealth. And so this is a text that we're quick to justify whatever level that we're at, to say, there's always somebody wealthier. Right? He's talking about the super wealthy.
Exactly.
And I don't think we have the luxury to do that, of a little bit of perspective. And in Zambia, that pastor would tell you he has it better off than some other folk that he ministers to in his church that have even less.
Right.
And so it's all relative.
Yeah.
And so to wrestle with this in an honest way, and not to be quick to justify of he's talking to them, like let it sit, and no, he's talking to me. And
Right.
Yeah,
I do want to maybe here in a bit we'll try to dive into what exactly does it mean to be wealthy or to be rich. But looking at this story, there are a few details that stood out to me just at the outset. First of all, we see that Mark is known sort of as the action gospel. There's always quick Jesus action. Is always on the move, and he's doing things. There's a lot of physicality.
This is your favorite gospel, isn't it?
I do like Mark. I encourage people to start with the Gospel of Mark if they've never read the Bible, and Mark is great because it's short, 16 chapters. So if you read a chapter a day, in about 2 weeks you're going to read your first book of the Bible, and also it's highlighting the main figure in Scripture, which is Jesus. It talks about his life. His
Yeah, I just like, because if anybody doesn't know you personally and they're watching it, they don't know that you're always on the go. So I can figure like something about this resonates with you. Like, you get to the point. Here we go. Let's go.
He's definitely on the move, and we see that here. Jesus, he's getting ready to head out on a journey, and so at least in my imagination, I get this picture of Jesus is just getting ready to walk out the door. He's getting ready to leave town, and this young man runs up to him. It says, a man ran up, knelt down before him and asked him, "Good teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life?" The scene itself is just very iconic, So Jesus is getting ready to leave, and you get this sense that this guy wants to catch Jesus. He knows Jesus is leaving, and before Jesus gets away, he wants to find out from him a basic answer, which is, what do I need to do so that I can inherit eternal life? And when you see this phrase, inherit eternal life, it's really synonymous with entering the kingdom of God, and that's why later Jesus, he talks about entering the kingdom. So what is it? What do I need to do so that I get in? That I can be part of this kingdom of God. And Jesus, as he often does, doesn't respond directly to this question, right? He actually responds with a question of his own, which is so often the case with Jesus. He doesn't come right out and just tell him, well, here's your answer.
Mm-hmm. Why do you think he does it?
Well, I think part of it was because part of the issue that we see in this interaction between Jesus and this young man is this young man's understanding of who Jesus was. So I think my sense is that in this encounter, the young man saw Jesus as someone who would have the answer to this question. So he definitely had an elevated view of Jesus. He calls him a good teacher. He kneels down before him, which again, if you just picture this in your head, like, this is a very respectful, reverent way that the young man is approaching Jesus. And yet, it's not high enough. As respectful as he is towards Jesus, Jesus wants him to understand that Jesus actually has a higher position than this young man even appreciates. So this young man just wants an answer from Jesus, and then he's going to go about his life. He doesn't really see, I think, an ongoing need to be connected to Jesus. He just needs an answer from Jesus so that he can get something valuable, which is access to the kingdom of God. And I think a little bit later, Jesus comes back to that to try to show him in a gentle way. In fact, it says, one reason I love this version of the story is it says Jesus loved him. So Jesus is not coming at this from a harsh point of view. He's trying to help him see something that maybe a more important question than the man was asking. This is a long answer. So the man's asking, what good thing must I do? I think Jesus is trying to show him, who do you need to be connected to to get into this kingdom? Yeah,
I think you're right. I think Jesus in one way is showing an elevated view of himself. Like, who's good? Why do you call me good? Who's good?
Yeah.
There's only one who's good.
Yeah.
And he doesn't say he's wrong. And Jesus does not say that Jesus is not good. He's getting at do you understand what you're really saying?
Yeah.
There's only one who's good, who's God.
Right.
Which Jesus obviously is God, right? And so he is, but this guy doesn't know that. But I think Jesus is doing something else there too. Because if you back up before this text into Mark, the last words we see Jesus saying in the text just before this, it's the story of the little children coming to Jesus.
Right.
And the last thing he says is verse 15, "Truly I tell you, anyone who will not receive the kingdom of God like a little child will never enter it." So the last thing we hear Jesus saying is that the kingdom of God is not something we do to get into, but it's something that is given to us, and we have to receive it like a little child. The very next story is of a rich man coming up saying, what do I need to do to get into it? Yeah. And so there is a difference here that Jesus is highlighting to say, And it reminds me of the Beatitudes, and this gets to what he's going to do throughout the whole this. But blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of God, or the kingdom of heaven. So Jesus he immediately, while this is often about wealth, I don't think that's fully what Jesus is doing here. I think it's about self-sufficiency.
Yeah.
And the reason, and I'm jumping the gun a little bit here.
No, that's good.
But I think what Jesus is showing is, oh, no. Your posture, you might be kneeling on the ground.
Right.
But even
you're saying the right words.
You're saying the right word.
Teacher.
But even that, you're buttering me up. You're like, I can do this thing. Give me the thing that I need to do. Right. And it is not that humble posture of, I have no chance. Mm-hmm. It is not what Jesus was saying a little bit with man, it is impossible.
Right.
This guy's kneeling thinking it's possible.
Right.
Which is, you think of a child receiving a gift, like the child doesn't have the resources to go out and buy himself something, or he has, the only way he can get it is if it's given to him. This guy thinks, no, I can get it on my own.
Right.
And so Jesus, right out the gate, I think he is revealing something about himself, but he's also revealing something about the man that he's about to highlight in a huge way.
I like that, and I agree. I did notice as I looked at each passage, from Matthew and Luke's Gospels as well, that's the case, that the story about Jesus blessing the children precedes this interaction. So in all three Gospels you do see, and of course we're pulling these 10 just to focus, but all of it is set into this larger context of what was happening, I think, before. So that's a great observation, not only in the passage that precedes this with Jesus blessing the children and entering the kingdom, receiving the kingdom, but the perception of our need, because I do think that sort of, the man knew that he was deficient, it seems.
He knew he was lacking.
Yeah, he knew that there was something still needed, and so he's coming to Jesus looking for the answer, and Jesus does end up giving him what he needs.
Yeah.
But as we'll see, unfortunately, the answer wasn't something he was willing to receive.
Yeah, and Jesus responds to it. So he goes on and he says, no one's good except God alone, which he is setting up the only way unto salvation for any of us is through God. So, but the guy is confused about that. So he's not only asking, so that there's a sense in which the man is coming and saying, Jesus, you're good. What do I need to do to be on your level? And Jesus is like, oh, you're confused, dude. There's only one who's good. Right. And everybody falls short of that. Yeah. So then he says, and so then Jesus gets into, all right, then you know the commandments, right? And he's going to point out, I think, a sin of the man that is a little bit hidden here. So he says, you know the commandments: you shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal, you shall not give false testimony, you shall not defraud, and honor your father and mother. Yeah. And he says, I've done all these. What do you think is unique about those commands?
Well, one of them is, the one that stood out to me is do not defraud.
Yeah.
I don't think that is...
seems to stand out as not one of the 10.
It's not one of the 10 commandments.
Right.
So I don't know if that was what you're referencing, but what do you think about
I think that's one of them. What is unique is in the 10 commandments, you kind of have two sides, right? You have the love God with all your heart side, and so they're all, have no other gods before me. Right. And you have love your neighbor as yourself side, right, which is all others oriented. Right. Jesus doesn't give any of the ones that are God oriented. He only gives the ones that are other oriented. Right. Okay. And in fact, Matthew is his version of this adds on to this, and love your neighbor as yourself. So that's he's wanting us to understand that what Jesus is saying, okay, you want to do, then do these things. And so the guy's response is, well, I've done that since I was a boy. But here's what's interesting about loving your neighbor as yourself, and Jesus is going to teach something. So the thing that he tells them to go do is that all of these are about keeping from harming your neighbor. Right? So part of loving our neighbor as ourselves, don't wrong your neighbor. But then, and so the guy says, I've done that. I've never, essentially, I haven't harmed anybody. I haven't defrauded anybody. I haven't. Yeah. And then Jesus takes it a step farther and says, but have you done good to your neighbor? Because there's even more to loving your neighbor as yourself. I get there's more to what he's saying in go sell all that you have and give to the poor. Mm-hmm. But there is a give element here and Jesus is one who left wealth untold in the kingdom of heaven, humbled himself to give everything he had to us who are impoverished. And so Jesus has the right to say, I know exactly how to do this. But when we think Jesus loves us, we don't just think that Jesus did no harm to us. We realize that Jesus has blessed us. And so there's an element here that Jesus is helping this guy understand. Oh, you can do no harm to somebody and still be extremely self-focused. Because you're not about blessing others and helping others. And so there's an element here that Jesus is highlighting. And I think that fits in line with New Testament teaching about wealth. Right? So I jotted down some notes, like 1 Timothy 6:17 through 19. Let me just read it real quick. Command those who are rich in this present world. So this is Paul talking to Timothy on how to preach to the church, which is going to be one of our questions. Of what do we do with wealth? Command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant, not to put their hope in wealth, okay, which is so uncertain, but to put their hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. Now that's an interesting line, right? But there's a lot to that, and we're going to see a lot of that come out in what we're about to read from Jesus. Command them to do good, so to be proactive with their wealth, to be rich in good deeds, and to be generous and willing to share. In this way, they will lay up treasures for themselves as a firm foundation for the coming age, so that they may take hold of the life that is truly life. So a broader New Testament, how did the early church understand Jesus' teaching on wealth? Well, now we're getting a bigger picture. Here is not saying wealth is evil, but it's saying use your wealth to bless others, to serve others, to be rich in good deeds. And God gives us everything to enjoy. There's an element of enjoying that, but don't put your hope. Don't think your wealth is for you or any of that. No, I'm kind of jumping the gun there.
It's okay. It's good. Yeah. It's great. So just for our listeners again, what was the reference there?
It's 1 Timothy 6:17 through 19.
Beautiful. I mean, I think people have heard that saying that the Bible is its own best commentary. And so it's a great example, I think, as we try to wrestle with Jesus' teaching. What we see here in 1 Timothy is Paul and the early church, their commentary, what they would have seen this as being in alignment. So these instructions that Paul's giving in 1 Timothy 6 are in alignment with the teaching that we see, or the story about Jesus and his encounter with this young man who had wealth, who had great wealth. And just a few things that stood out to me as you were reading it, just from memories. One is don't be arrogant. Don't put your trust in riches. And these are tendencies, these are ways that I would say wealth or riches work on our human nature.
Why is that? Why does wealth, because I think that's what Jesus is doing in the young ruler as well. Why does ruler, which he had that arrogance, right? I can do this. So which is I think what Jesus is actually attacking. I don't think he's attacking wealth. I think he's attacking self-sufficiency. That wealth tends to make it easy to have.
There's two things, and we talked about this a little bit, I think, before we started recording. But one is that self-sufficiency, which I agree with completely, where we don't sense our need for God. We're blind to our own need for God, and therefore we don't come to him. We don't trust him. And then the second is a misplaced value system where we're valuing the things of this life higher than we should, and we're not investing in the coming age. So Jesus says, don't store up for yourselves
treasures on
earth, but treasures in heaven. And then likewise, you see it here, that he, in 1 Timothy, there's that idea of investing for the coming age.
The life that is actually life, he says.
Yeah, using your worldly wealth now in a way that actually pays dividends, so to speak, in the age to come.
Because you're investing in people. You bless people. You use it as a way to help, which is God's greatest value. You use that. What, as you begin to think about self-sufficiency and what Jesus is getting to here, so he's also attacking first century understanding of wealth within Judaism, which we do this within Christianity now, is that a person, their understanding, like you read the Psalms or you read the Proverbs, and it seems to, if you're not careful with a careful reading of it, it seems to be that those who are wealthy are because they have been righteous. So they equate wealth here on earth as God's blessing that God has given, because you must be more meritorious or deserving of that. And that was first century understanding of wealth. We kind of can do that if we're not careful within the church now, right? And so Jesus is attacking that outright. So he then turns and says that, it's harder for a man, to get to our saying, a rich man to go through the eye of a needle, get into heaven, than for a camel to go through an eye of a needle. And what's the immediate response from the disciples?
Yeah, so we're looking at verse 24 here. It says that the disciples were astonished by his words. Yeah.
Well, that was before. Then he gives the eye of the needle statement, which is 25, and then verse 26. They were even more amazed.
Yeah.
They're like, and look at their question. Then who can be saved? Because you hear their assumption in there.
Right, yeah.
Is that if anybody can be saved,
it's this guy.
It's this guy. What we tend to do when we read this is the reverse. We read this and go, man, it's hard for the rich to be saved. I'm going to be all right because I'm not rich. But that's not the result that it had on Peter and the disciples. It was the reverse, because which is actually what Jesus was doing in that time. And what he does not say is that it's easier for the poor to be saved. Jesus does not say that, because the same way that the rich are saved is the same way that the poor are saved.
Right.
It's also as hard for the poor to enter into the kingdom of heaven than for a camel to go through the eye of the needle.
Right.
Because no one can earn their way in, which is what Jesus is ultimately saying. So he took their picture of what the most righteous people looked like, and he says, nope, they can't get in. In fact, this impossible thing can happen before a rich man can get in. Right. But that same is true for the poor man, which is why Peter asked, then who can be saved? And Jesus' response is the gospel. With man, this is impossible. That's his whole point. And he's saying there is no one who is self-sufficient enough to enter into the kingdom of heaven. In fact, there's only one way. With God, all things are possible. And he is pointing them to the only way to receive this is as a gift from God. That if you think, and so we have to be careful that we don't reverse engineer this to think, oh, Jesus hates rich people. Right. Like, no. Right. Jesus hates self-sufficiency, because no one gets in that way. I do think, and you pointed this out earlier, there is a danger to wealth that Jesus is pointing out here. But the danger is that, as you said, and what 1 Timothy says, it leads to arrogance, which is what the ruler has, because it creates this self-sufficiency more easily than the poor, who kind of go, man, I don't have, it's easier for me to recognize I don't have much when I'm poor. That's what Peter does, and then I can't be saved.
Right. I mean, so I guess, just kind of riffing off that, the poor man is in just as dire straits as the rich man.
Absolutely.
It's just easier for the poor man to see that he doesn't have what it takes to get in. I was reminded, even as I was reading these passages in preparation for our conversation about Revelation 3 and Jesus' words to the church in Laodicea, and you really see that, how Jesus hates the self-sufficiency. And so he tells them here, and this is in Revelation 3:15, I know your works. And he's talking to a church, a group of believers. I know your works, that you are neither cold nor hot. I wish that you were cold or hot. So because you are lukewarm and neither hot nor cold, I am going to vomit you out of my mouth. For you say, I am rich. I have become wealthy and need nothing. And you don't realize that you are wretched, pitiful, poor, blind, and naked. I advise you to buy from me gold refined in the fire so that you may be rich, white clothes so that you may be dressed, and your shameful nakedness not be exposed, and ointment to spread on your eyes so that you may see. And so, again, this church in Laodicea probably did have material wealth. When they said, I'm rich, I don't need anything, that was because they did have material wealth, like you said, relatively speaking, to their contemporaries. But what it had led to was an attitude and an approach to life that did not seek God, did not rely on God. And that's really what Jesus is saying that they needed to repent of, is come to me and buy the things that you actually need. So the spiritual poverty, even though they have material wealth. So, go ahead.
I think Jesus is attacking two things: self-sufficiency and self-centeredness. Right? Because don't use your wealth just for yourself.
Yeah.
Go do for others.
When we get to the implications and applications at the end of this conversation, I do want to talk about, well, how do we take away from this story and really the larger teachings of the scriptures on money? How do we live differently so that we are less like the rich young ruler? I want to go back to something you said, though, because I thought that was a keen insight. I've never made that connection. You could really see Jesus himself as the rich young ruler, as the one who had basically done this. I never made that connection, how Jesus himself left his wealth and came down to love others even more than himself, like to sacrifice himself. And in Philippians 2, we see this connection where we're told, have this same attitude in you, which was also in Christ Jesus, who, even though he existed in the form of God, did not regard that as something to be held on to, but emptied himself and took on the form of a man. The verses just before that say, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, but in humility consider others better than yourselves. Each of you should look not only to your own interests, but also to the interests of others. Have this same attitude in yourself. So you do see, in a sense, you see Jesus inviting, it is a hard saying, but it's Jesus inviting this young, wealthy ruler to follow in his footsteps, to do the same thing that he himself had done. Yeah,
and this is what it means to follow me. Jesus did not tell the rich young ruler anything different than he had told Peter and he had told Levi. It was, hey, drop your nets. Drop what you have. Come follow me. Hey, leave the tax booth. Come follow me. Right? This is the calling. And what Jesus is not, as we talk about what it means to be a disciple, Jesus is not an addition to our existing life. The call to follow Jesus is a dying to your way of life. Leave it.
Yeah.
There's such trust in that. Which is what Peter will say, man, we've left everything to follow you. He feels that.
Right.
And if we have not clearly articulated to whomever we're discipling or trying to lead to Jesus, that that's the invitation, then we're doing it wrong. Because I think what we often try to do is, let me just take Jesus and add him to my existing life and it'll be blessed and I'll be good.
Right.
This is a whole new way to live. This is a complete change. So leave that old way of life behind.
Right.
Old way of thinking, interacting, and start afresh and anew. So if you're a fisherman, that means leave your business behind. And He lets them return to it, but they return to it totally different. If you're a tax collector, you left that behind. We don't know, do they return to being a tax collector afterwards? We don't know. But in here for the rich man, here, what was he? And I find the word inherited interesting as well, because the word young is not used in Mark. It's actually used in Matthew. So we referred to him as the young man.
Yeah, but ruler is used in Luke.
So we kind of combine rich, young, ruler, right?
Yes.
But there is a sense that he probably inherited whatever wealth he has.
Yeah.
What must I do?
So.
Right. So Jesus is going after. There's no business for him to leave behind. Like he inherited all this, right? But I can see Jesus coming after, like, if you made a lot of money off a business, man, the temptation to be self-sufficient. I mean, I've worked hard for everything I have. And how different is that than what Timothy says when he says, but put your hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. The American, I pulled myself up by my bootstraps, I've worked hard for everything I have, totally overlooks who gave you health, who gave you opportunities, who gave you the sunshine every day to get up, who gave you the intelligence, who gave you the strength, it just overlooks all of that, and it runs right immediately to, look what I've done. And that's such a dangerous place to be in, right? So I think the bigger picture there is, for anyone coming to Jesus, we have to understand what he's inviting us to. It's a death to self and a new way to life. And Peter's question of, and I think we have to look at it, is, man, we left everything to follow you. And look, and how does Jesus respond to that in Mark 10?
Yeah, in Mark 10, Jesus says, it's a little further than we had read, but in verse 29, truly I tell you, Jesus said, there is no one who has left house or brothers or sisters or mother or father or children or fields for my sake and for the sake of the gospel who will not receive 100 times more now at this time houses, brothers and sisters, mothers and children and fields with persecutions and eternal life in the age to come. But many who are first will be last and the last first.
I mean, he is, we probably need to shelf the first and last. That's a whole nother hard saying in Jesus to recognize.
Yeah.
But hear what he's saying there. He's like, yeah, you have to trust me. Come follow me.
Yeah.
Leave it behind. And I will move in your life. I love that, and with persecutions. There will be blessings.
Right.
And also there will be persecutions. But eventually, there's eternal life.
Right.
And so the call to follow Jesus has not changed through the centuries. It's certainly not just add Jesus to your life. It's a death and a new life.
Yeah, that really, that's a great point. The whole dynamic of what's happening here, we of course, I think are naturally captured by this idea of a wealthy young man selling everything and giving it to the poor. But what really needed to change, in fact, in Mark's gospel here, he says, one thing you lack. You lack one thing in verse 21. He says, go and sell all you have and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Then come follow me. And I believe that highlights the thing that was lacking, the thing that was going to change if this young man acted on what Jesus was telling him, was that he was going to have Jesus. That was what he did. He didn't have. And here, you do get the sense, like, Jesus is leaving, he's running up. He just wants this short interaction with Jesus and then to inherit eternal life. He doesn't understand that what he really needs is this ongoing, this whole new life, this whole new life with Jesus versus just a slightly improved version of his old life, which is, I think, what he was looking for when he first came to Jesus. Now, my own thought here, I don't know exactly why Jesus tells this particular man to go and sell all that he has and give it to the poor. This is a unique and very specific challenge that Jesus is giving to this individual.
Right.
So we don't see him doing that, even with some of the other disciples that we see being. Now, they are challenged to make Jesus the priority and basically leave whatever it was that would keep them from following Jesus. So if it's the nets, okay. If it's the tax booth, okay. here it seems that the thing that was going, and the thing that ultimately did prevent this man from following Jesus was his wealth. And it even says he went away. So he did the opposite of following Jesus, which is what Jesus had invited him to do. He went away, he was sad, but ultimately he went away because he wasn't willing to take that step.
Let's dive back down into the truly I tell you, because I think of what Jesus says there when he says no one has left home, brothers or sisters, mothers, father or children or fields for me.
Right.
So there you list off of those things.
Of stuff.
That's a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And I think while you are correct that Jesus, we don't have any other story where Jesus has told somebody that you need to sell everything you have and give.
Right.
We have lots of stories of Jesus calling people to generosity. That's different. But this particular, why is that all? That word all stands out in there. And I think it's because what Jesus does demand is wholehearted devotion to him. So he went after the place of the guy's heart God wasn't allowed there. That wasn't wholehearted devotion. I think he's doing the same thing for fathers, children, mothers, home.
Right.
We have these places of our heart that Jesus, you're not primary for me. My children are primary for me, right? Or my spouse is primary for me, or my parents are primary for me, or my fields, my job is primary for me. In Jesus, you become secondary. So the invitation to leave those things, and then he promises you'll get those things back. And so what I find interesting there is, like, I just preached on divorce, and in the sermon I said, my first love has to be Jesus over my wife. It has to be Jesus. But what is ironic there, that actually enables me to love my wife with a selflessness that I could never do on my own, that will result in an even happier marriage. So what does it mean that I have left my wife in that sense, and this is what Jesus, to love Jesus, to follow Jesus, and then I've gained my wife back in a way that he gives it back. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I think there's a sense here of what he's saying, and man, we have elevated family within the American church,
right,
to be primary in so many ways,
definitely,
as opposed to devotion to Jesus. But to say that to leave those things doesn't mean that he doesn't also then bring those back in a different perspective. So I guess what I'm getting at is the reason I think he does that to the rich young ruler. We have no sense that he has family or any of those things that he's worried about. So his treasure,
right,
his spot in his heart is, what is it for, is wealth. So what is it for me? What is it that Jesus has come to me saying, hey, that's the untouchable spot for you, isn't it? That you won't love me primarily there. You're scared to give that up.
Right. So I think what you're talking about there is a good, we're drawing out a larger principle about faith and following Jesus, which is he wants our total devotion. He wants to have the priority in our lives. And if there's anything that's threatening that, then we can expect him to challenge that.
Just as he did the rich young ruler.
So I think that's important, because I've definitely heard this passage used as, well, no Christian should own anything, because Jesus challenged this individual, that he made this a prerequisite with this individual the question is all about being saved and inheriting the kingdom of God. And so is this specific instance of Jesus and the rich young ruler, is that something we apply across the board when it comes to wealth specifically? I think the principle is, and this is where we have to be careful, because our temptation is to soften the hard sayings. But I do think that the principle that we're drawing out of this passage is that whatever it is that would keep you from following Jesus, whatever it is that would cause you to go away sad because you just weren't willing to give that up, to have this connection to Jesus and to inherit the kingdom of God, let that go.
This is absolutely a hard saying.
Yeah.
But I think we diminish the hardness by making it only about wealth. I think we make it less hard, because what is actually hard is he's saying die to yourself.
Yeah.
give it up, come follow me.
Right.
And I want to reduce that as much as possible.
Well, it's kind of like, it reminds me of the story where Jesus says, what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his soul?
Absolutely.
And that's really because on the one hand you could say, man, this is such a hard, and the disciples were astonished by it, but I think you're right. I think what they were astonished by was not that Jesus challenged a man to give up his wealth. They were astonished that Jesus said it was going to be difficult for
a rich person,
wealthy to enter the kingdom.
Because that was their bad theology.
So I don't think they were shocked that Jesus challenged the guy to do.
Welcome to Jesus, dude. Like,
But it goes back to this idea of, well, is there anything that's worth missing out Jesus over? Mm-hmm. And I think that's the story here. You could say, wow, what a challenging thing that Jesus gave this rich young man to sell everything. But you could also say, like, wow, this guy had the opportunity to follow Jesus, to come and follow. Like, this is a pretty unique invitation in the Gospels, and he walked away from it.
Absolutely. In regards to wealth, we can zoom out and say, while I don't think this story is primarily about wealth, I think wealth was the opportunity that Jesus used within this man to point out a flawed theological perspective for them, for that all have fallen short of the glory of God. All will need. There's only one way, one truth, one life. It's Christ. There's no Jesus plus my meritorious acts get me. It's Jesus or nothing. Like, I think that's what this is about. However, there are larger perspectives on wealth. You know, Jesus talked. You have the parable of the bigger barns. You know, and what good does that do you? You have the parable of the sheep and the goats, and not serving others. You have Paul's words there to Timothy. There's other places in the New Testament. James straight out says that the poor are more righteous, right? And how he comes in. So and you have the text that you read in Revelation, which I think is great. So what is, how, if we're asking specifically about wealth, of how should the Christian understand wealth? I go back to that Timothy passage, and I like this a lot. And I'm going to go back to my story in Zambia. There's a sweet man that gave some money specifically to the other pastor and I, who were in Zambia, and we're there to train pastors on biblical preaching. And there's a sweet man who, out of his wealth, gave a pretty big chunk of money so that we would take these pastors in 2 different cities. So it was a total of about close to 40 pastors to lunch, take them out to eat, which is such a normal activity for you and I.
Right.
I don't know when the last time was that I ate a meal with somebody that was so thankful than that meal with those pastors. I mean, because they can't afford to eat out that often. And that somebody in America had given money, somebody not in America, somebody in the American church, somebody in the church had given just to bless them.
Right.
They ate their food with such just excitement and gratitude. It made my meal. I was grateful. I was like, this is one of the. So you look at it and say, in that Timothy passage, when I'm just living out of myself all day long, I'll go do something, and there's opportunity there for me to be thankful, but it's just it's at lunch. It's on my way to some other activity.
Right.
Whereas when you live without self-sufficiency and you see everything having come from the hand of God, which is the danger of wealth, is that I stop seeing it as a gift of God. We lose that perspective of who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. And the irony there is, the more self-sufficient and routine I become, the less enjoyable it becomes. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So the first thing that I need to do with wealth is to ask, I'm going on another trip. Is it even that enjoyable to me? Or do I see this
Right.
as a gift of God? And am I using it as that? And I'm just living out of gratitude. And the higher the gratitude, the greater the enjoyment, right?
Yeah.
And then, secondly, after self-sufficient, Paul gets into then using it for others.
Right.
So the danger of wealth is to use it on myself and to become self-sufficient. And so instead, and so I need to see that and Scripture says, hey, money is the root of all evils. That's a whole nother teaching. But we've got it all throws in there. I need to see, hey, this, and why is it the root of all evil? Because it leads me to self-sufficiency. It leads me away from God.
Yeah.
It leads me from seeing His generous hand. And so if I can switch that mindset as a Christian, say, everything I have comes from God. And some of it He's given for me to just enjoy, and some of it He's given it for me to bless. And there's even greater enjoyment there, right? And blessing others. And so, to me, I think that's the larger picture of New Testament teaching on how the church should understand wealth. Because let's face it, of without wealth, without folks giving,
Right.
and I get to, as a pastor, I get to see these. I don't pay attention. I don't in our church. I don't know who gives anything. I don't want to know. I don't want to be connected to that. But our accountant will come and say, hey, somebody gave,
Right.
$10,000 for missions. And I'm like, that's a lot of money.
Right.
I've never sat down and wrote a $10,000 check at one time to just give to.
Yeah.
There's others, man. At the end of the year, we'll have folks. She'll come in and say, somebody gave $80,000.
Wow.
Like somebody gave. Man, that's awesome. The kingdom of God.
Right.
And Paul did that when Lydia became a believer in Philippi.
Right.
She's the beneficiary of the whole church. She funded so much of what he did.
Right.
And he was so grateful for that. So this. I know I'm going on and on.
No.
So I'm getting at wealth is not evil in and of itself. But it is the root of evil if it leads us to self-sufficiency and self-focus.
I'll link this in the show notes, but I wrote a short article actually on the passage from Timothy where he talks about the love of money is the root of all sorts of evil.
Yeah.
And there's important words in there, love.
Yeah.
So it's not just that money is the root of all evil, but the love of money is the root of all sorts of evil, all kinds of evil. But, I compared it to fire. Fire, wealth is dangerous because it's similar to fire in that it's powerful, and fire under control is a blessing. It can do much good. When you drive your car, most of us are driving combustible internal combustible engines, and that's fire. Fire is making your car go, but it's under control. Fire out of control will destroy you. And so wealth in the same way, it's so powerful if we don't see it the way God sees it, and if we don't use it the way God instructs, then it can bring great damage and harm to us. But the reverse is also true. If we can see wealth the way God sees it, and we can use it according to how He instructs, it can be a blessing to us and to many others. So I do think one of the questions we wanted to ask is, why was this story related to the first believers, the first church? One way to understand the Gospels, the Gospels were written, even the earliest Gospels, the most conservative scholars would say, were probably put pen to paper 30 years after the events. So think about that first 30 years of the church as they're spreading the message and people are coming to faith and churches are growing and spreading all over the Roman world. After 30 years, let's say, give or take, Mark writes his gospel. What you have in the Gospels, in a sense, are the greatest hits. These were the stories that were so sticky, that were so commonly used among the early church, that 30 years later, people were still talking about them. 30 years after the rich young ruler, people in the church knew that this story had important lessons to teach us on how we think about and handle wealth, how we think about and understand our posture towards God, how we think about and understand salvation. So doing a deep dive on this story, I do think that there's lots for us to learn.
But I think that one of the reasons we just want to be careful is that we also need to realize the context of those first 30 years are totally different than our context now. And Jesus, there was that theology that the wealthy were more favored by God. James attacks that. And says, hey, don't give the wealthy man a higher seat in the church. What are you doing?
Yeah. That's such a great insight. Like, so for us, we would see these hard sayings of Jesus, and we would say, well, the hard saying here is that, it's the camel going through the eye of the needle. The hard saying is that, wealth will keep you from the kingdom.
Mm-hmm. That's not what he's saying.
The hard saying for them was, hey, the wealthy can't get in, then who can be saved?
That's what he's saying. And so to really get that's what he's saying in this, it drives, the answer for the rich man is the same for me. It's same for my brother in Zambia. It's same for all of us. There's one way in, and his name is Jesus. And so wholehearted devotion to Jesus, go follow him. He's the one way, right? So that's our calling. It's hard.
Yeah. Well, do you have any final thoughts or suggestions for how people can keep that posture, have the right mindset about their need for God, the priority of Jesus, and the right perspective on wealth?
I think it goes back to seeing everything as that I have, every moment that I have, kind of teach us to number our days. Everything is yours, God. Every moment, just to receive the entire day like a child receives, a gift and say, hey, that's how I need to live my day.
Yeah.
I want to be childlike, grateful, not childish, and stubborn and selfish, but childlike in my heart. I was saying, God, you've given me this day, and I think if I can live with that posture of gratitude and generosity, that kind of combo, I think I'll have the right relationship with wealth.
Do we have gratitude for what we have already been entrusted with, and do we have a sense of stewardship? Like how can I use this in a way that blesses others and honors God, and also brings enjoyment? I think that's or like, is there a striving? Is there a striving for more, or trying to hold on to what I already have? I think the only thing I would add to that from this story is, am I seeking Jesus and staying close to him? With the rich young ruler, he was approaching Jesus really not out of a need for Jesus, but wanting an answer that he could then go and use. And ultimately, it says that he goes away sad. He leaves Jesus. And so I guess that's another question I just want to ask myself coming out of this conversation is, do I have a need for Jesus that causes me to stay close to him, to continue to seek him, to rely on him for my needs, not just in this life, but in the age to come? Or do I have that sense of self-sufficiency that I've got this, I can handle life and I'm going to be set going forward? Those would be some questions I want to take away from it. Yeah,
I think it's good. I think we all just need to sit and let the Lord. There is one little nuance that I love, and maybe we can end on this. And this is I didn't take a look at the Greek of Mark, but I did of Matthew. And in verse 26, after they ask, that who can enter the kingdom of heaven, the verb, it says that Jesus looked at them. But the verb there for looked it's a verb for he fixed his gaze on them. It's to look intently at them, and says, hey, with man it's impossible, with God it's possible. And I just love that picture of Jesus looking at his disciples, but Jesus looking intently at us, and saying that that's such a moment of grace there, of hey, with you it's impossible, but with me everything is possible, right? And just I see what is lacking in you, and I know it. I still love you. Depend upon me. And for the disciple to just feel Jesus, seeing their deficiencies and not running away, but running to and saying, hey, I know you're deficient. That's the whole point of why I came, right? So depend upon me. So for whatever it's worth, I loved that. There's something about God. I think of David in the Psalms saying, "Who is man that you are mindful of him?" Like I just something to me where I'm, who am I that you are mindful of me and that you look intently at me? Say, I see you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's a gratitude in that I just kind of want to live out of.
Yeah, it fits with the verses prior. Approaching and receiving the kingdom like a child. So, brother, thanks again, man, for coming on. I always love our conversations. I feel like I always learn something. Hopefully, those of who are listening or watching, benefited and learned some new things about camels and needles. All right, brother, we'll do it again soon.
All right, man. Thank you. See you guys.